In a world where the United States is overthrowing its seventh Middle Eastern country in 20 years, Republicans now shrug and insist this isn't even a war. It's just a leadership refresh, a Democratic glow-up, 4 days of precision freedom delivery, no big deal. But Matt Walsh cuts through the nonsense with one brutal question. What is a war? What is a War? A Matt Walsh documentary, coming soon to Daily Wire Plus. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Human Reaction Podcast. My name is David Rand. Trying to have a little bit of fun, it's so dark right now. It's so frustrating and irritating at everything happening. It doesn't bother my life, but it definitely makes the podcast hard to do because I want the things that I do to make the world nicer, like a better place, and not be like terrible things are happening and are on the horizon all the time. So I hope you like our What is a War trailer. So we're going to be digging into the Iran war, kind of a mega episode. It might drag on a little bit, just because I wanted to be thorough to get everyone as up to date about what is happening. We had a long discourse in the Discord about what is happening? There just isn't that much reporting. And frankly, it's partially because the fog of war, and our Department of War is not that forthcoming about certain things. So we need to make sure that we are kind of on top of stuff, that there's as much information as we can. I did a lot of work on that today to try to get you the best information we could. And then some strategic assessment, some analysis, and some where is this going? What is the plan here? Because that's also been very vague. And it just is the casus belli, if you will, the just cause of the war. That whole theory has kind of gone into a flood the zone technique. We are kind of left to speculate. What the heck are we doing? I did want to note, though, there's this really cool website that I found called Iran Cost Ticker, IranCostTicker.com. And it's pretty cool. You got how long we've been going, how much it's cost. It's cost us $5 billion, almost $6 billion, coming up on it here soon. Might cross it while I'm recording the podcast. And interestingly, it has the cost of the THAAD interceptor missiles. We'll be digging into those numbers and the Patriot missiles and the different things that we've done so far. Pretty interesting. This is kind of like the bright side of the internet. Someone can just prop that up. So anyways, before we go any further, though, I want you to like, subscribe, comment on the podcast. And, guys, we're going to be talking about certain countries in the Middle East. And in which case, if I say Iran, no problem. We will get algorithmic growth. That's not an issue. We've seen so far. But if I say shmishmishneer, that one country that you know of, it feels like we cannot get anything on those. I mean, you literally, especially on TikTok of all places. You know what? But it's just like it seems like it doesn't go anywhere whenever we do that. So. We've had some amazing success on X lately. We are really reliant on all of you to drop into the comments and just for the algo, let me know how I'm doing. Give me some of that encouragement. I love it. Please keep doing that. And be sure to like, subscribe, send this podcast to somebody else. If you talk to somebody about their Iran war and they just don't know what's going on, this should be a good introduction to what's going on because I'm going to be getting back to the basics a little bit just to refresh and then hopefully get to some good analysis about halfway through. So what is happening? That's an excellent question. Is it getting bigger? Is kind of been accused this week. And I tried to find a qualitative way to summarize that, because if you just look at the news reporting, it might leave you with that impression that, man, this seems like it's getting bigger. But we don't know a lot at any given time. We don't really know how many things are being shot down, how many missiles get through. We don't know. We do generally know how many countries are hit, though. So, is it going to last longer is the other key question. So bigger and longer and uncut and all those things, as you know. Innuendo, double entendre. All right, so Trump's first time horizon, when it very first happened, was 4 to 5 weeks, just 4 to 5 weeks to flatten the nuclear curve, if you will. Hedge sum in his briefing on March 4th, that's yesterday from this recording on Wednesday, that indicated he indicated up to 8 weeks. That's not him really moving it out. It's just more him riffing on, it's going to be until the job is done. What's the job? Well, it is to make sure the Iranian government can never have a nuclear weapon. Yeah. So that's a claim, and it's interesting, but it has been fuzzy the whole time, to be fair. So the cumulative number of countries hit, and of course there's good reasons to push back on the time frame, but will this get to more countries being involved is another measurement of, is this thing expanding? Is it getting crazy? We won't really know how long it's going to take until we know that the government's collapsed. And then from there, are we going to be involved in replacing this government? Because obviously these strikes are going far beyond just trying to end their weapons capability or their nuclear weapons capability. So, and we'll dig into why I think that later. The cumulative number of countries that are hit each day is increasing. I kind of got into it and kind of charted out each day and how many countries hit, and I had AI pull that together for me. It was an interesting, 4, 3, 5, 3, 9, and then we're up to 12 now, starting at 4, which is interesting. So that definitely shows some regional expansion. Most of these is, Iran hitting more countries in all countries of which there is a U.S. base that is trying to hit them. So I'm not trying to say like they're just blindly hitting people, but it is true that is regionally expanding and should have been part of the calculation from the very beginning, assumably that we'd know that, they would be hitting any place there are U.S. troops. I want to note here that Brandon J. Weircht, he's the senior national security editor at 1945.com. And he was on the Tucker Carlson show today, and he had a compelling case that China is providing targeted information and providing tech that is yet to be deployed in Iran, kind of using Iran to test weapons like we've been using Ukraine. Which is an interesting about this because that would mean another country. That would put us up to 13 countries. Additionally, that there might be some case of Russia being involved somewhere along here. I haven't seen any clear indications of that, but it makes sense for this to be another proxy fight war between us and Russia as we've done in Ukraine, or us and China as we've been doing in Taiwan, and that kind of cold proxy standoff. So he calls it more than just a proxy war. He calls it a world war, which is interesting. And also noting that, and this is something I, was planning on getting to even before I saw the Tucker Carlson thing. But the meta strategy that is being kicked around, at least for part of this, is this question of oil and Iran. And just keeping in mind, as we get through this, when you think about the meta strategy that, Iran does produce oil that does go to China, but it makes up 14% of China's oil. It is not going to be a society collapsing phenomena. So especially when you look at like the overall picture, like removing Venezuela from shipping to China, and then instead of shipping that to Israel, we're now looking at, removing Iran's shipping. And, there's going to be a lot of calculus or a lot of talk in the coming days about the price of oil and where all that's going to happen out of the Strait of Hormuz, and what's with natural gas, especially. American LNG exporters are about to have a really good day, but American business, as all that oil gets exported to Europe, is going to have a challenging time, I imagine. So I wanted to qualify. It's always something to talk about the numbers, but before I really dig into like the numbers and casualties and all that kind of stuff, I want to give you a picture of it. I looked around for good, like, authenticated videos, and they are extremely hard to find. I'm going to actually turn off the audio on this one. And, the videos like this are just, you have this big explosion at night. It's really hard to see that well. We've had some that are very dramatic. A lot of them turn out to be AI or turn out to be from a different time period. This one does seem to check out for multiple reasons. It was like vetted through some news agencies who used this video, but I've seen some very credible organizations use some ones that turned out to be fake too. But you see this barrage is kind of all over the place. It's going to completely surround this guy with his camera. as things explode and bombs are dropped on the city of Tehran. Tehran. I don't know. You tell me. All right. So by the numbers, we are at, tragically, 6 American soldiers are dead. 18 are seriously wounded in Iranian counterattacks. There was reporting today of a pilot being shot down, maybe on the border of Iran, going into Iraq, something like that. That was denied by the Department of War. So obviously, fog of war, a lot of propaganda. Beware. These are mostly the things I could confirm to the best of my ability. We're sitting at about 1,200 Iranians killed in strikes. It isn't clear how many civilians and how many soldiers, things like that. I'm able to find anything that was like reliable on that. I also get really questionable about the DOD or the Department of War on any of these claims too, because it's hard to trust your own government in this climate right now. I want to. I wish I could, but man, are they making it hard for me to do that. So we're now sitting about 12 Israelis killed, 1,400 injured. And once again, grain of salt. We don't know how many missiles are actually getting through. We do get some videos every now and then, but this is a very censorious country, Israel. See, that goes all of our reach. I said the word. So please comment. But we do have a real, like these are the numbers that they've been able to release. So it's at least this. They're not going to overstate it for sure. According to the Department of War, we're sitting about 2,000 targets struck in Iran. It might be 2,200. I don't know if that number was updated from today's targets, which were another 200 today. The U.S., and this is the combined U.S. and Israel. The Department of War does say that they have established air dominance, and that they've reduced the administration said yesterday that they reduced their ability to launch missiles by 60 to 65%. Today, actually this evening, I saw one from the admiral in charge saying that they've reduced it from like ballistic missiles and drones by 85 to 90%. So I don't know what that means, because we still get some of these videos that do seem real that have a lot of ballistic missiles in the air at one time, or like a cluster bomb or something like that. That might be just indicative of changing technology or whatever. It's really it's hard to know. But but these are some of now we're going to get into some of the other numbers that are the most important ones. And you do see active messaging, like to try to head this off from the DoD, which does make me question some of their other numbers. And this got a lot of coverage actually before as a reason why we shouldn't do this war. And then this week, we got a lot of coverage about this particular problem, which is how many missiles do we have that are good at targeting specific things and aren't like carpet bombing, right? And then how many defensive THAAD interceptors do we have? So far, we've burned through about 400 Tomahawk missiles in the first few days. That's equivalent to about 5 years of worth of production at current production levels. We make about 80 to 90 per year. Last year, only 50 were requested from the administration, which is interesting, everything considered in the budget process. And they're now going to be requesting more. I'll get that in a second. But the part of that is peculiar is knowing that the war is probably coming last year. I don't know. I mean, like you still would guess that, unless they caught them off guard, was what they kind of claim, is that they're kind of forced in this position. Although we're going to be getting into that, I'm pretty skeptical of that particular claim. But it's believed that we have about 4,000 of these Tomahawk missiles in stock. And for this reason, and this is from the DoD presentations this morning, is that we are changing the munition structure to use dumber bombs functionally. That we have air superiority. We don't need to use Tomahawks anymore. We can reliably attack with, air gravity bombs out of bombers, which means for more crude bombing in some ways. That is concerning from war morale point of view. They're kind of stuck between either reducing their smart bombs and moving to dumber bombs and getting a reduction in morale that way, or keeping with the smarter bombs. And then you have this problem of, civilian casualties being reduced, but then you run out of your stock potentially. Additionally to that, noting that we have these other commitments in other places, that this is one theater in what that guy was saying is kind of shaping up to be World War-ish, is, Ukraine and Taiwan as well, simultaneously, with great power, battles happening there. So the number to watch for, though, really, when it comes to morale and keeping morale okay for this, even as the war is unpopular while killing Khomeini is popular, is this THAAD interceptor question, because this is what's preventing our troops from being hurt by these missiles that are coming from Iran. So we had 8 THAAD systems in the Middle East. Iran claims to have hit 2 of them, although I couldn't confirm that, and obviously the DoD wouldn't admit it if it happened. What it was is it could have been radio stations close to it or something else. It's hard to say. But that said, what we do know is that we have a munitions burn rate that is substantial. We're talking in the 12 days that in the 12-day war last year, we used 92 to 150 interceptors. We only make 11 to 12 interceptors per year. If the burn rate is the same as 2025, we will run out in about 2 weeks. So if we're on the 8-week time horizon, we still haven't got rid of all of their ability to launch missiles, could be in trouble. The burn rate this year must be much higher than last time because Iran is launching much more aggressively than during the 12-day war. We're trying to take out their government. So, of course, come on. They have to be, right? So I also found some reporting that suggested that Gulf allies are reporting stores are low as well. That is not a good sign. And we're in a situation where the munitions burn rate is kind of the race in this war. If we can get their government destabilized before or get rid of all of their launchers so they can't attack us, then we win. To the degree that we're winning anything. I'm not exactly sure what we're winning. But we're winning, right? Or at least our troops are safer in that sense. And if we can't, and they can continue to weather the storm and launch missiles, and we run out of those THAAD interceptors, that's a real problem because we got to move them out of Eastern Europe or move them out of the South China Sea, and we'll be in trouble at that point because then those countries now have their opportunities arising, and our ability to only make a couple 1 to 12 interceptors a year is really interesting. And it's really interesting to watch these people say our defense industrial base isn't working anymore, because all throughout Biden, every spending package to Ukraine was sold to us as is to keep our defense industrial base alive. And it is so corrupt and so inefficient and so uninterested in doing anything productive. Apparently, we can't make more than 11 per year or a couple hundred Tomahawk missiles per year. The biggest country in the world with a $1 trillion requested defense budget just cannot make enough to do this, which just really shows just how thinly spread we are, how expensive these things are, maybe how hard to build they are. I don't know. I'm not an engineer. I don't know how hard to build them, but I'm very curious, what is going on there? Some parts of the good news about this as well, as far as for America's ability to engage in war, was a particular interesting claim from the admiral kind of in charge of the war as he was talking today in Tampa with Pete Hegseth, was that we have adopted cheaper drone technology to be used in these circumstances so we can make them in mass, that's a good news. He actually had this quote, I should have clipped it, where he says that we got an Iranian drone, took it home, gutted it out, put American parts in it, stamped made in America on it, and now we're using it in the battlefield because they had such a cheap design. And it was like, wow, well, it's unfortunate that we couldn't design our own cheap design. That says something about our defense industrial base and how much disruption is really needed there to fight a modern war. And I want us to be able to fight a modern war. I want to be able to defend our country. I just don't want to fight wars on behalf of a foreign country. Yeah. So the Senate voted today, and the House, wrongly. The Senate voted 47-53 against advancing the War Powers Resolution. Only Rand Paul, the son, Rand Paul voted yes in the Senate, which is a real tragedy. You would think that there could be some better votes out of the Senate. Really disappointed in Mike Lee and a couple other senators that say they're good, but unfortunately are not holding up their fidelity to the Constitution. As you can see, we're not fighting a war, apparently. So the House voted and also failed 12-19. We're doing a little bit better. Our Republic is holding on by 3 total votes, or is dying with 3 votes protesting it. There you go. And that was Massey and Davidson. Davidson is Representative Davidson's out of Ohio. And he had a great quote that I wanted to share with you guys on this that inspired the introduction to this episode.
In support of this war powers resolution today, because the moral hazard posed by a government no longer constrained by our Constitution is a grave threat. The threat to a government no longer constrained by the plain meaning of words is not new for Democrats. Recall that Democrats needed help answering, what is a woman? Unfortunately, Republicans now want to claim they can't answer, what is a war?
Based. That was fun. So, yeah, he had a great speech. Actually, that was just a small clip, but I watched the whole thing. It's excellent. Thomas Massey also had a great speech. And then we got the response from the War Party, the supposed great constitutionalist, Speaker Johnson, in his role to come out after defeating the War Powers Resolution to give the justification from the war hawks on why they voted it down.
Well, we just had an important series of votes on the House floor. As you know, the War Powers Resolution failed. That is the right result. We are not at war. We have no intention of being at war. The President and the Department of Defense have made this very clear. The Department of War has made it very clear. This is a limited operation. It's an operation that's limited in its scope and duration. It has a very clear mission, and that mission is nearly accomplished by all estimates. We are taking down Iran's ballistic missile capability, its stockpile, and its ability to produce more. They were doing that at a scale and a speed that was more than our regional allies could keep up with, and it was a serious and imminent threat to the United States. We don't need to relitigate all that today.
Now I'm going to relitigate it. So, number one, it's kind of like we're not at war. We just overthrew a government. It's not a war. It's a limited engagement. I mean, we're dropping serious weaponry, more weaponry than when we had the authorization to use military force to enter Iraq. Like, we simultaneously have the DOD, the DOW, the Department of War, telling us how big this operation is, how awesome it is. And yet we simultaneously are being told by the Speaker of the House, like, it's just a little tiny thing. It was not even a war. It's like you literally, it's Speaker Johnson's argument is this. It's something like you sat down with your wife and said, look, honey, I didn't commit adultery. It was just a blowjob. It was just fellatio. I mean, it wasn't something else. You know, that would be technically adultery, but you know, it was just a little no big deal. Like, think about that for a minute. Obviously, that sort of thing wouldn't be considered that. You can't change the meanings of words like that. This pedantic legalism is just a way to avoid taking any responsibility for what's happening. The Constitution very clearly put the war powers in the hands of the legislative branch. In the 1900s, in the 20th century, we got way over our skis not caring about the Constitution. And I've been told again and again, every election year, that Republicans are the party that cares about the Constitution, that wants to be a republic. But what you keep voting like, and the reason why you're going to get slayed in the midterms this year, is you work less like a republic, more or less like representative democracy with the rule of law, and more like an empire. If we're going to be an empire, then that's how you vote. Every time, it's just that Star Wars clip. You know, this is how democracy dies, with thunderous applause, because it's exactly what it is. It's just slower. It's not as dramatic. It doesn't have a, force zombie guy with lightning shooting out of his hands. It's just the regular march of tyranny and executive ownership of everything. So the president is now asking for another $50 billion of money that we do not have to go to replace these munitions that we're burning up. Even though we already are requesting the biggest defense budget ever in the history of mankind, we still need an extra $50 billion supplemental because of this very surprising war that just popped out of nowhere. So, there we go. That's the numbers. So the explanation for why we're doing the war, as he said that we don't need to litigate, is all of those things, right? They are building ballistic missiles. Well, if it was because they're building ballistic missiles, I really have a question about whether or not the ballistic missile program accelerated after we attacked them last year. I mean, think about it. They're in the JCPOA. They build ballistic missiles like every other country because that's kind of the way warfare is kind of sorting out to be. Is THAAD systems versus ballistic missiles, because we've gotten so good at telemetry and, global positioning, all that kind of stuff. We'd be very accurate with missile launching. So a lot of countries are moving that direction. Russia is, China is, we are, Europe is, everyone is. India is, Pakistan, everybody. So if they're building more now, after we bombed them last year, maybe part of the reason was we shouldn't have bombed them last year. Right? I mean, and if it was the same before last year, why didn't we bring this up at all last year? And in fact, if we were at, all these other arguments are just kind of just leave you with more questions. And the overall explanation is so incoherent, you can't help but just feel like, man, y'all are just lying to me. Now, I want to take this quote this particular clip from our new Homeland Security Director. This is when way back this morning, when he was, or actually yesterday, when he was still a U.S. Senator. He's now being nominated for Homeland Security Director. This is Punchy McPuncturson, as I call him, lovingly. This is the guy who tried to fight the Teamster guy in the middle of a Senate hearing. And old school listeners will know that reference because we got a good chuckle out of that one back in the day. Old Punchy McPuncturson he was going to give his deep analysis into why we're at war in Iran after a briefing.
You'll concede this is war. You'll concede this is war.
We haven't declared war. They declared war on us, but we haven't.
War. Secretary Hicks said
we haven't declared.
Just now, you said this is war.
They've called it war.
They've called it war. What I was saying. Okay, well that was a misspoke. What I was saying that they've declared war on us, but war is ugly. It always has been ugly. But we're taking out a regime that's been trying to attack us for quite some time.
But you're not.
They say they're trying to attack us, and it's war when they do it, but it's not war when we do it. When we do it, it's a strategic military operation of limited scope. But when they do it, yeah, that's war. So funding proxies is war. Bombing things is war. When they do it. But when we do it, not war. There's no need for Congress to do it. That is what you call cowardice, if you will. I'm not attacking Senator Mullen specifically. I just mean Congress in general, refusing to take a vote on consequential things because and I understand that it's a hard vote, right? Especially mid-operation. This is why Congress should work actively to repeal the War Powers Act or reform it substantially at minimum. Because think about it. Now you have to interrupt something that's already happening. I'm a very anti-war person, and I think I would struggle with that vote, if only because it's already ongoing, right? Once it's started, you don't want to stop at the wrong time. That could actually make things worse than the alternative. In theory, I personally would suggest that no matter when, the next thing to do is give the peace part a chance again, if you can make that happen. But there might be a certain point of that you have to go all the way in. The worst place to be is in striking range, not too far away, or you want to be too close. for strikes to hurt. At least that's how it works in fighting. So I deeply wonder, that this moment is really exposing, hopefully to a larger group of people, that the war powers is the biggest problem. Instead, I worry that people are moving more into, no, we just got to get Congress out of the way because we just don't even want to have this discussion ever. We also had Trump this week in the incoherence of talking about the casus belli of this war as a imminent threat because they were about to build a nuclear weapon. Let's check it out.
You see the tremendous progress that's being made. Their missiles are being wiped out rapidly. Their launchers are being wiped out. They're attacking their neighbors. They're attacking their, in some cases, allies or not so long ago allies. And, it's really a nation that was out of control, and they would have used it on us if we let them, if we waited any longer. A big factor was Soleimani, the killing of Soleimani in my first term. And maybe the biggest factor was...
Did they increase ballistic missile production after we bombed Soleimani?
Was the rebuilding of the military in my first term. And then the B-2s hit the... and I use the word obliterate because it was a complete obliteration of their nuclear potential. And that set them back very, very seriously. If we didn't hit within 2 weeks, they would have had a nuclear weapon. If we didn't do the B-2 attack a number of months ago, they would have a nuclear weapon. And when crazy people have nuclear weapons, bad things happen.
So yeah, that's the Netanyahu reason out of Trump's mouth there. And there's something what he's saying, right? They had a latent nuclear capability. The question was whether or not they had ever decided to use it, keeping in mind that the reason why they have nukes in the first place is because we gave them nuclear energy. And we gave them to the Shah, and then, the history then played out from there. We could dig into the history again another time for the larger audience, but we've done it before. You can check out all the episodes going all the way back. I think 3-4 years ago, I did a whole episode just on Iranian-American relations and history. So the Vance got in, and I won't play a clip on this one, but he basically said, we're doing this for regime change. It's just too bad, too nasty of a regime, the religious fanatics, blah, 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 all the talkers that you've heard before. The question I have with the nuclear power thing and with this is like, okay, but can this be done with air power alone? We can't you can't drop a bomb on uranium and it just goes poof. So what happens to the nuclear fissile material? You say they got all this 60% nuclear material. Most of it's at 20% or less. That's a long ways. Like I said, two weeks of enrichment and all the things potentially to make something that's bomb worthy. But you could make a dirty bomb with that in theory. Why not? Why? Why are we bombing them if they have that? Because now they have every reason to be, right now, as we speak, rushing to make a nuclear weapon. Right? Like, isn't that what bombing them does? So and then second to that, even if we killed all the people who might be able to do that, or might be able to give the order to do that, or whatever, assuming their structure is as hierarchical as maybe we're assuming, we still have this particular, and I haven't seen anyone ask this question of the administration, is like, what about the nuclear material? What are we doing to secure that right now? I mean, we're not going to have boots on the ground, thank God, but also, if the plan is just to bomb them, do we have to kill all of them in order to make sure that nuclear bomb doesn't get into the wrong hands? A dirty bomb? Isn't that nuts? Right? Like, I don't know. I just want a good answer, really, Don. I just want to know what the plan is for that part, because kind of freaky when you think about it. Al-Qaeda operative gets in there and gets a hold of it. That's real scary stuff. I don't trust the Al-Qaeda guys, even when they're in charge of Syria. So we have Rubio on, and this one went pretty viral, but I do think it's worth playing again because this is one of those moments where just looking at the timeline kind of tells this story a bit. And you're left, especially after last year where we're mid-negotiation and Israel attacked them, and then we attacked them. So it's kind of like, it kind of fits with the modus operandi of us and our relationship with Israel. So it also fits intuitively. But then when Marco Rubio comes out and says this and then denies it, and then we're going to look at it there together. So when you see this, it's going to be his denial of what he said and then what he said.
Yesterday, you told us that Israel was going to strike Iran and that's why we needed to get involved. Today, the president said that Iran was going to get
Yeah, your statement is false. So that's not what I was asked very specifically. Were you there yesterday?
Yes, I asked the question.
So the president made the very wise decision. We knew that there was going to be an Israeli action. We knew that would precipitate an attack against American forces. And we knew that if we didn't preemptively go after them before they launched those attacks, we would suffer higher casualties and perhaps even higher those killed. And then we would all be here answering questions about why we knew that and didn't act.
So that's where I just get like 1,000 more questions, because you're still left with okay, so you're left with the conclusion that everyone's already drawn. You've seen it everywhere, but I'm going to say it too, just because it almost seems like pretext floating, right? Like, and they're trying to walk it back, or he was just very honest all of a sudden. It's either a pretext of like, well, we had to do it because Israel's jumping in. We can't do anything against Israel's wishes. And then everyone goes like, wait, we're fighting this for Israel? They're like, whoa, I didn't say that. And then, but it just asks more questions of, okay, so we're in negotiations. We're doing this whole military buildup. Why wasn't part of the whole military buildup saying, hey, American citizens, get out of the Middle East? We might go to war. Why didn't we use that to put pressure on? You just put out a press release that says, we're not planning on going to war. But if Israel's saying, we're tracking where Soleimani or where the Ayatollah is, and we're going to strike them eventually at some point here, or they just didn't give us any warning, and it was just like, oh, shoot, bomb them right away. Why were we building up in the first place if we knew this was a likely thing? Wouldn't it behoove Israel to like care about our posture in the region before they got in, especially since we're funding them, defending them, and now conducting the war with them? And it is a war. And then second to that, another one that I read, which is interesting, is like, okay, so we didn't warn American people in the region to get out to protect Americans ahead of time. We could have done that during negotiations in the eventuality if we thought that it was going to go this way. So that's kind of crazy that we didn't do that. And then second, why didn't we fortify our bases? The folks that died, the soldiers that were killed tragically, they were on the base, from what I read, from what I understand. Correct me if I'm wrong. Comments. And I'm also reading that the bases weren't as well, like they have like temporary fortifications they can put up. They don't stay up permanently because it's inconvenient, but in this eventuality, they do have material for doing that. And they didn't do that. They were kind of caught, the guys on the ground were kind of caught flat-footed. And that does indicate a little bit that we were surprised by Israel doing it. And then you're like, it's kind of like you're hunting together. You got your buddy and you got two elk and you're like, you're going to shoot up and you're going to shoot them. And you're like, okay, we're going to shoot them. And you just get, you're not quite there yet. You just get the scope to your eye. You haven't, got your breath in and you haven't really got your finger on the trigger, and your buddy just frickin' wings it downland. You gotta pull. You gotta go. Now's the time. So you gotta rush that shot. Maybe you kind of mess up a little bit when you rush that shot. Should there be some accountability for making us rush like this and putting American personnel in danger for that purpose? Part of the escalation of negotiation could have been everyone leave the Middle East. Oh no, here's some very conveniently leaked instructions to the bases in the area telling them to fortify in visualization of a potential attack. They start doing that. They get the photographs from China saying, hey, check it out. They're fortifying their bases. I don't know. It seems like if in any of those circumstances, Israel rushed us into this war, that is not the actions of a good ally. And there should be some accountability for that, specifically for the 6 Americans who died. Maybe it wouldn't have mattered, but we would have taken every opportunity we could have to make sure they were safe before we got into this. And if that wasn't done because of Israel, I really feel like there should be some amount of accountability for that, right? Am I wrong here? Maybe I'm not seeing something, but that's what it seems like to me. Just engaging as cleanly as I can with what I see, what I'm reading. Next up is Trump had some rhetoric on negotiations, noting that, and I want to note too that there was a lot of reporting this week about like the negotiations, how it was. And I have something from Witkoff himself came through today that I want to note. But there was, after the attack, maybe a request for a ceasefire from the Trump administration to Iran, who then was rejected. That's been denied by everybody. Everyone's been accusing, oh, you want in the fight. No, you want in the fight. I don't know what's true there. But it does kind of make sense. It would make sense for the administration to try to get out of it as quickly as possible so we don't get dragged into a forever war. So we can maintain kind of the Trump approach. But this was known beforehand too. Like, I remember watching and reading about this specific problem that the Trump administration's kind of positioned themselves in the negotiations before the war started, that the fundamental logic had changed from last year. Once you've invited someone to negotiate and then your ally that gets all of your weapons from you bombs them and then you assist them in bombing them further, your next negotiation round is going to have a hard time, right? And second to that, the logic of, well, Trump's thing is to get in and get out, to get in and then, force you to do your, symbolic attacks like they did previously, where they call ahead about when and where they're going to attack to minimize American personnel being injured. If you've done that in the past, and every time that happens, killing a Soleimani, doing the attacks against Fordo and all this other stuff, the next time, the third time, it's like, no, shame on me. What was the Bushism? First time, shame on you. Second time, shame on you. Third time, shame on me. Yeah, something like that. That's where we're at. The next one I want to know is, I'm going to change this around real quick. We do have this comment from the press secretary of the president that I think is worth noting, because it might get you a little bit at the psychology of the administration and decision making. Perhaps. I might be reading too much into it. They're kind of forcing me to do this a little bit because their explanations are so incoherent. Like even Bush had a more coherent explanation first. I kind of made that point last podcast. But this time around, there's so many different ones, and they're so tenuous to the decision-making framework that it's really hard to understand how they got here. So but I do have something to add to this. I think adds a little richness to what her point is.
The president had a feeling, again, based on fact, that Iran was going to strike the United States, was going to strike our assets in the region, and he made a determination to launch Operation Epic Fury based on all of those reasons. And the president
had a feeling based on fact that the Iranians were going to attack us. Now, is that in reference to Israel attacking them first, or is that in reference to, because the question always with the Israel attack first and now, oh shucks, we got to do it, is the fact that they are our client state, that we give them money. So why are they in charge of this right now? They do have more stake in what happens. They definitely want their regional hegemony, but we're still left with the question of like, why is that the situation? And so I at least to bolster, and I'm kind of agnostic on I don't know what the final answer is. I really don't. But to bolster the side that's saying, well, look, there's some there when it comes to the collaboration between Israel and America. And that would happen, of course, at the level of the negotiation. So Steve Witkoff was on with Mark Levin. And I just want to make this point that you guys know that I love you and I love this podcast because I listen to Mark Levin for you. And if that doesn't earn a like below and a comment of thank you, David, for listening to Mark Levin for me, and if that doesn't earn you joining our Discord, just to let the Discord know the sacrifices I go through to make this podcast happen, I don't know what will. So, but I did take some notes, and I want to summarize it for you because listening to it will make everyone's ears burn. Mine were bleeding because that's just how bad Mark Levin's voice is. Iran, and this is from Witkoff his articulation of how negotiations went and how fruitless they were. So Iran articulated their right under international law to enrich uranium for peaceful purposes because it was in the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Iran had done everything right by their measure. They said, we did all the things that we're supposed to do by international law. The treaty that America created and designed and forced the entire world and persuaded the entire world to buy into, right? The Non-Proliferation Treaty. That was suspicious to Witkoff, right? And you don't know if that's coming from like his being, a fan of Israel or if that comes from the president. But for some reason, them saying, no, we're in this treaty like everybody else, and we're going to pursue that and maintain our ability to enrich our own uranium. We're kind of serious about that. Because, and at least a part of this that isn't stated in the Mark Levin thing that I want to mention here, is because there's been a couple other countries that when they gave up their nuclear energy, they were overthrown later, right? They were kind of looking to try to get nuclear weapons or nuclear energy, then they gave it up, and then they got overthrown. Assad, Libya, places like that. So, yeah. Witkoff's rationale there is strange that he would wind up that being suspicious because that's kind of like the standard of international law as it currently is, that you have a right to develop nuclear energy for peaceful purposes. So, but I also understand his skepticism, right? Because they do have that 20% and 60% stockpiles. We'll get into that. So he blames the Ayatollah in this dynamic for not being more flexible. But what's also interesting about that is that he kind of places the demands from the Americans very high, and he kind of blames Trump for that. He kind of says like Trump directed them. At one point he says he gave them Witkoff and Kushner wide berth, and the Ayatollah wouldn't give his guys wide berth at all. But then he also earlier says that he was directed basically that they had to remove the entire program or it was no deal, which seems kind of ridiculous. Granted that we just bombed them last year. So the Iranians were supposed to give up, another one of his gripes was the Iranians were supposed to give them a proposal 5 days after their second meeting, but then didn't get them a proposal until the third day, and then they weren't allowed to actually keep the proposal. The Iranians just read it to them, told them the terms, but then kept the piece of paper. They didn't have a stenographer there. I'm confused. And this was done with the Oman guy there. I mean, like he didn't have, I don't know. It kind of a weird gripe. Another one was that he felt like it was weird when Iran didn't bend to their threats during negotiation, right? It was like, it's so strange that when we parked our carriers off their coast, they didn't, capitulate. And it's like, well, dude, like they want to survive as from their perspective is that they want to survive as a state, right? And so like, why would they? Because once they do that, then they're no longer an independent state, right? So another one of his very suspicious activities by the Iranians is that after Midnight Hammer, after last year, they didn't let inspectors in. But wasn't that predictable, right? If they allow inspectors in, they're in the JCPOA, they're still in compliance with the JCPOA, and yet the inspectors are there, but then we pull the inspectors out and then we bomb them. Why would they want to go back in? Why would we? I don't understand the logic there. It just doesn't make any sense. Now maybe you might be able to persuade them to let them back in. That would be the deal. That would be the contingency of the deal at that point, right? No, I'm not a fan of the Ayatollah. I'm not a fan of Iran. I just don't understand the negotiations here. It's just strange. Another one was that they hid their missiles, their ballistic missile programs, which is when you're fighting against the hyperpower that is saying you want to use your weapons against Israel, and they're saying, no, we don't like you guys, but we don't want to go to war. That doesn't translate to, therefore, we're going to tell you where all of our missiles are. That's not suspicious. That's like regular state stuff. And this might sound crazy. Like you might be like, oh, Dave, you're being so sympathetic to the Iranians. I'm just saying like any state behaves this way. This is not unique amongst states. This is what power does to people. It makes them paranoid and, very concerned about losing that power. So I just don't see why we treat Iran any different than any other state. And I can hear it. I can hear opposition saying, but David, they say death to Americans. Hey, I know. And I don't like that either. But keep in mind that you got to like know that you're doing a translation when you say that. It's a little bit like saying, F America or screw America. It's kind of like if you're speaking in Arabic and you stub your toe, you would say, you wouldn't say death to the Ottoman. That's kind of ironic. Death to that table I stubbed my toe against. That's what you'd say in Arabic, right? It's kind of like that form of expression. They don't like us as a country. There's sensible reasons why that is. Just looking at it as like a crime scene investigator, kind of looking at it from the outside, be like, oh, okay, there's motive there for them not to like us because we overthrew their government back in the day. And then, yeah, things like that. So, and then we've put on the sanction regime that made them incredibly poor and hard to feed themselves and get medicine and all the other challenges that go with being an enemy of the United States. So it's definitely not that we're coming in just white as snow in this situation, right? So of course they would hide their missiles. They could use nuclear power was another, one of his things. But their proposal from the administration was they could use nuclear power, but they had to have another country provide the uranium, specifically America. And they were insulted that they wouldn't want to give up their nuclear power program and not be able to enrich anymore. Well, that's because their strategy to not become a client state, so they didn't end up like Syria or Libya, was to have a latent nuclear capability so that we had to deal with them somewhat like equals. That was their strategy. In understanding that strategy, I don't see how you're thinking that you're going to get any successful negotiation, which is become a state that acts as if you never had nuclear power to the first place, especially when we gave it to them, right? So another one, and this is actually the best one from it, and I learned something from this. But it is interesting when you look at the overall wrinkles, but it is interesting is that there's this particular reactor that we've talked about since last year called the Tehran Research Reactor. It was built by the United States, interestingly, was enriching up to 20%. Keep in mind, weapons grade is 90%. But rather than using it and then kind of getting expelled, they appeared to be stockpiling it. Now, what's interesting about this is that that's not new development because that was revealed by the IAEA under the JCPOA. Now, okay, so that's the agency that inspects for nuclear compliance, right, through the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, the IAEA. And the JCPOA is Obama's nuclear deal. So there were still JCPOA inspectors during or before Operation Midnight Hammer. And they discovered this. So it's what it is like, why did we pull out of the JCPOA? I can't. If we were able to uncover that they were doing this, then why couldn't we use it to say that way? I mean, one, that's a much more clear casus belli. At least it's like a sensible, hey, why during negotiations wasn't that brought to the forefront of American rhetoric in this area, saying at minimum to at least get people on board or like more interested in like seeing this from your perspective, American government is saying they're stockpiling at 20%. This was discovered by the IAEA, but they couldn't do that. The reason why is because they jumped out of the JCPOA. They said it wouldn't work. It couldn't discover anything. So Iran had claimed that it no longer had stockpiles of fuel at the TRR, but in fact, they might have been, the accusation of the inspectors was that they indeed were at another location. That's a big deal. Now, if that was a big part of the negotiations, it seems like you could have gotten somewhere with it, right? If it was, hey, you need to, do something with this particular stockpile, and I'll never do that again, and we're going to re-enter it into the JCPOA Trump Edition 2.0, where you have inspectors and they're more empowered. And there was some reporting about where that Witkoff totally doesn't mention at all about how far Iran was able to go in terms of what they proposed. And it was far beyond where the JCPOA left them at when it comes to how little enrichment they could have at any given time. So he's definitely only showing one side of the story, and it's very much, tilted into, we just couldn't, they just were too unreasonable. So their last pitch was no enrichment for 10 years and the U.S. buys the fuel, right? The answer was no. And then, they get into the whole question of, was the Gang of Eight informed of the negotiation dynamics before Trump went in? He doesn't know, but he knows that Vance and Hegseth and Marco knew. So that's interesting because all of the reasons for this, that was not in them, the TRR. And that's either like the administration isn't being very confident with their messaging, which doesn't seem right because this administration's been relatively good at messaging, right? At least as a campaign, less so as an administration. So I do wonder what kind of happened there. Not saying the TRR is like a good casus belli, but at least it's like a basis point of negotiation that you could start from. That's not, hey, completely end all nuclear refinement, because at that point they're just exposing themselves to being curvy sword phenomena like Libya. All right, so I want to get into, I'm just crossing the 1 hour mark here. Sorry, guys, this is a very comprehensive episode, but I wanted to note a theory, my theory. Now, I came up with this theory on Tuesday, recording on Thursday, and it has only become stronger over time. I was on the phone with my brother, and I was like, look, I kind of think they're doing Syria again. It just has some like modifications, but it's pretty much the same plan. Now, here's the background. During the Iraq War, there was the real problem with the Iraq War was that you had all these U.S. troops just sitting ducks in Iraq, right? So if you were a Shiite militia, you get together, you make some roadside bombs someplace, you plant them alongside the bomb, and all those soldiers are exposed to those kind of attacks. There was a book called Dying to Win, written by a guy named Robert Pape. Robert Pape assembled the largest deposit, like information bank of suicide terrorist notes of like their motives ever, right? The DOD was actually, at the time it was called the DOD, actually contracted with them to better understand suicide terrorism and use their database. Very interesting story from that time period. His explanation was that the reason why suicide terrorism exists almost universally in all places on the planet and all times, he has this enormous, going all the way back to like the Tamil Tigers in India and things like that, and the Irish IRA and all the different places where we've had suicide bombings and terrorism. And what he said is that it's always has to do with having a overpowering force close by you that you're able to reach out with this particular method of attack. Now, what he advocated was a pivot from the Iraq War strategy to what he called strategic offshoring, which is you bomb them from a distance and you never get close enough to them so that they can do their terrorist attacks. And therefore you keep morale high. We don't run into Iraq War fatigue, and you can do the reshaping of the Middle East you need to do. Obama leaned hard into that. And we saw that in Syria specifically. The U.S. bombs the forces of the governments we don't like, but then we use the CIA and asymmetric proxy forces as the ground troops. Then when they attack each other, it's not our boys being hurt, it's somebody else's. There you go. Stay salty, everybody. So the question at that point is, well, who are the ground troops? Well, we got the answer. And I got the answer like literally only not long after this. And my first instinct was only that they struck like early on. I remember reading about some of the early targets was border security targets on the border between Iraq and Iran and Turkey and Iran, which is interesting. It might be like, oh, we need to, in case we need to invade, but it could also be that's where the Kurds are. That's where maybe certain Shiite forces in Iraq that we worked with back in the day might be. So we have this scoop from Axios. Scoop, Trump calls Kurdish leaders in Iran war effort. Now, this reporting was contradicted by Dropsite News, saying that this call never happened from the Kurdish leaders. But we did have a whole cycle here from Fox News and other places that putting out fairly strong articulation that there is that thousands of Iraqi Kurds have launched a ground offensive in Iran too, which might be over the top. Maybe they even got the call and they're just kind of denying it for political purposes. Maybe they plan to, but haven't yet. We're kind of trying to head fake Iran into overextension, but attack the Kurds maybe. It's hard to know. That head fake is interesting, but it really makes sense when you look at where the Kurds are at. So this is a map of this relevant area of the Middle East, right? You got Syria, Iraq, Turkey, Armenia, and Iran. The people group that is the Kurds is in this area that is called Kurdistan regionally. And this should be the shape of a country, but we didn't shape it this way specifically to block any amount of majority Kurds from being able to have their own state for all kinds of reasons in Sykes-Picot and the post-World War I era when all these countries were drawn on the map by colonial powers. Obviously, the lines have shifted a little bit here and there. So the Kurds are partially in Iran, partially in Iraq, and we've worked with them in Syria and Iraq in the past, and they're a real pain in Turkey's butt for all kinds of reasons. And so what we look at is if we destroy the boundary here of the Kurds, then you can get flows of Kurds across. You could get some real problems for the Kurds could make in Iran. So the Kurds being maybe one of the ground forces. The other one that came to mind immediately was MEK. And remember that last year we exposed a story. Some other people got to it too. I think we're the first ones, but we exposed a story of like this like super fake, ridiculous report that was actually reported on Fox News and a couple other right-wing outlets about a tritium factory, a tritium refinement factory in Iran that was, that they were exposing. And we got to it, and there was all kinds of reasons why it was BS. Tracked it to a group that was then connected to MEK. What they are is a bunch of commie kind of cult-like group that's been operating inside and outside of Iran for a very long time. They actually participated in the 1979 coup d'etat against the Shah, but then fell out of favor because they're atheistic communists, and this is a religious dictatorship actually took control of the country. So they've been used by the United States as a proxy force in the area to give Iran a hard time for a long time. So I do think it's interesting that Hegseth did say that there isn't an objective to arm any secondary forces. He said our objective, and I don't know if he was referenced the Department of War or the U.S., right? Because obviously the CIA is in his purview. And a strategic officer would say the CIA needs to arm the Kurds. And then I got another report, this story this week, later this week, actually yesterday, that prior to the invasion that there were some reports from anonymous sources about the CIA arming the Kurds in Iraq. So interesting. And we've been doing that for a while. They fought with us on ISIS and all that kind of stuff too. So we do have the elements. We're doing the air campaign. We have the people on the ground to start the civil war and result in a Syria-like situation. And the next thing you need to encourage the government collapse. Well, that's why you kill the Ayatollah. That's why you kill the bombing and the meeting of the people who are going to meet with the Ayatollah. You remember the 12-day war last year. There's the messages from Mossad to the members of the administration basically saying, flee Iran now or go into hiding or we're going to kill you and your family. Those kind of intimidation messages. I mean, all of these things, and I've been saying this since last year, this is a regime change effort, right? J.D. Vance confirms it. All these other administrative people confirm it. When they say we need to make sure Iran can never get a nuclear weapon, what they mean is we need to overthrow the government of Iran so they can never get a nuclear weapon. Now, what happens to the nukes, though? Right? It's still an open question of you have all this nuclear material, and you're going to encourage a civil war in that country. What happens to all that nuclear material? How do you make sure it doesn't end up in the wrong hands? So I have a theory about that. And this is where I haven't seen anyone say this yet. You remember last year at the very end of Biden's administration, there was all these drones flying around cities for like long periods of time, just kind of doing weird maneuvers, and they weren't explained by anything, and everyone was kind of freaked out about it. And the administration just were like, what drones? I don't know what you're talking about. That's not happening. What are you talking about? It just wouldn't say anything. And then when Trump came in, he was like, oh, is it a drone program? But at the time, we were like, these are UAPs, man. What are these things? Weird lights, but sometimes they look like airplane lights, and other times we kind of had some other, look like kind of stealth craft. So we were still like in this weird spot where we didn't have this explanation, and then Trump administration came in and said, well, it's experimental drone program that was being tested. Now, one of the things that was reported at the time is like, what if this is an experimental drone program and it was specifically to test long flying, like stay in the air for a very long time, like days at a time, monitoring of a territory. Now, what if you equip one of those things with something that can sniff out nuclear fissile material? You have a nuclear material sniffer floating above Iran for as long as needed, days and days, maybe weeks at a time, and you're now left with, whoa. That's the plan, is to sit with that new drone technology just to float over Iran and sniff out for nuclear weapons, nuclear material. And then once you have that, then you can drop in with a team, pull it out, kill whoever's doing that with a Predator drone or something like that that's on standby, gets summoned over, shoot that guy, blow up that building, whatever, to stop them from developing that nuclear weapon, then go in and get it. Very crazy program, but maybe that's the idea. I'm just guessing here, just like some interesting hypotheses based upon the fact that they're not telling us a whole lot. The next one is like the strategy of civil collapse. You can't, if you have strong civil institutions, you might not end up with the general collapse that you might have, that you need. There were lots of messages to these, like we covered last week in Farsi, to the people of Iran, basically saying, hey, this is, we need to, you stand up and overthrow your government, that sort of thing during the protests that were happening in January. Imagine those are still going on. And there was a story of the maybe Mossad or somebody hacking their broadcast messages, encouraging people to rise up and overthrow the government. The Trump administration said, no, stay in place. Don't be going outside right now. You're going to get bombed. Stay in place. Wait until it's time. So, but there is an encouragement to eventually get to do that. But if you have strong civil societies, then like it makes it a lot tougher, right? So you need to bomb police stations. You got to make sure you can get, your terrorist head chopper types like what we put into Iran or into Syria to be able to rise up. And those guys are going to be more like going to get in trouble if they have to deal with the police. So you got to bomb police stations. Probably might have to bomb some hospitals. And things like that to cause civil chaos so that you really put the crunch on people to like, I'm desperate enough, I'm going to go out and I'm going to try to overthrow the government. So we do have some indication of the civil collapse. Now, police stations, I was able to confirm with CNN that has happened. The hospitals have been accused. I wasn't able to confirm it, but I mean, I wouldn't put it past them. All right. So, and I wouldn't pass it Israelis. I don't think Americans would do that. So the plan, here's the plan hypothesis I see. All right. 1, decapitate. 2, neutralize the ballistic missiles because we're in this race of THAADs versus nuclear. So you got to get rid of that so that they can then, you own the skies completely and your neighbors are safe and we don't have like the fatigue of people getting killed, American soldiers being killed. Next, you have the government collapse. You have to make sure that they can't reestablish a hierarchy. You have to keep it all very decentralized. Next, then you have to collapse civil society. Then you have to get them worried about troops on the ground. Get all the countries around Iran mad at them for more immediate reasons than just asking them to. And what's really interesting about that is you have to have an immediate reason, right? And Tucker Carlson early this week broke news saying that two Middle Eastern countries had exposed Mossad agents planning attacks, false flag attacks in their country. That's crazy. He didn't say where his source was, so obviously that. But if you trust Tucker Carlson, which, I think he's earned some trust on a lot of things, taking brave stances like he has, I have some questions. Is that a real thing? And if true, it would fit with this particular strategy. And then note, there was another false flag attack accusation on Cyprus on a British facility. That would be the 12th country, British facility in Cyprus. But apparently that was Hezbollah, not Israel. So there was some accusations of that online. But still, stick with it. So you get all of these countries mad at them. You got them in the Abraham Accords. They have an immediate reason to hate Iran. Then you publicly walk away with our active military presence because we've already taken out all of their stuff. They're fighting a ground war. They're against like proxy forces. They're fighting a civil war. Then you walk away as the American military. All your boats float away. Your airplanes fly away. You have no presence other than the Central Intelligence Agency doing the actual dirty work on the ground to win the civil war. Then you inject Reza Pahlavi. I can never say this guy's name right. Pahlavi. There we go. Reza Pahlavi. Yeah. He's the guy, maybe. At least it's interesting to me that he's like the guy for the neocons. Like they dipped their cards so low on this that I was talking about this like 4 years ago. I was saying, and it was in the Scott Horton was debating. Oh man, somebody famous neocon, spacing his name right now, and he comes out and he says like, yeah, well, you still have Reza Pahlavi there to take over the country and put it in a better direction, right? And it was meant to signal like, oh, we don't need democracy, we just need stability in the country. And he's the son of, he's in the line of the Shah that we originally installed after Mossadegh was trying to, basically renegotiate things with British Petroleum. We put him in. He ran the country for 20 years. Not him, his dad. And then the Shah is kicked out in the 1979 revolution, and they've been living in exile ever since. So we bring that guy's kid back in. We say, you're the king now. Congratulations, you're the Shah. Now, is this the actual plan? We do know that Trump wants a say on who Iran's next leader is. He has said specifically that Reza may not be the guy. I don't know what they're going to go with, but I don't think it really matters because I think all the strategic aims are accomplished that part as long as you've collapsed the country. They're no longer a threat to Israel. And if that's your strategic aim, then you've won. They would be satisfied with a failed state as much as they would with a democratic or monarchical transition. So you have, at that point, you have every opportunity that you need to do the Huckabee thing, right? Right? You can do your greater Israel. You could do these other things because there's not a lot of other countries in the way at that point because you've undermined Hezbollah. You can conquer Lebanon as needed, all those kind of things because they don't have the support. You don't have to worry about the ballistic missile program of Iran anymore. So at a minimum, the United States has guaranteed Israel's regional hegemony in the area if you achieve that goal. And you can see how people wouldn't find that objectionable if you think that Israel is our greatest ally. So the predictions based upon this, if this is indeed true, if that's the actual strategy, get a failed state, maybe you can put in a new Shah, but really failed state will be good enough to achieve your political goals because that's what war is just achieving a political goal through mass murder. Honestly, if there's a lot of ifs that go with this. If Trump doesn't pull out quickly, he takes a black eye for not achieving regime change, right? If he's not able to do this quickly enough and the regime persists, which is kind of what the regime needs to do if they're going to achieve their war aims at all, they're shooting at just survive. We're shooting at you need to go into being more worried about civil war than you are about us. Then it settles into Syria again at that point. And we get the Kurdish equivalent of HTS and Ahmed al-Shara, if you remember him from the new former head chopper leader of Syria, who is former Al-Qaeda member and former ISIS member that is now in charge of the country of Syria. He's the new leader of Iran, the Kurdish version of that guy, whatever that looks like, or MEK, or some, person associated with the Shah, if not him himself. Shah might be better, to be honest with you, if I had to choose between the two. Between MEK communists and maybe a guy who spent a lot of time chopping heads in Syria, I would maybe prefer the Shah. If a leader doesn't arrive quickly, we'll have a lot of Shia unrest across the area. Now, this is interesting too because we killed the Ayatollah, but the Ayatollah he's the supreme leader of Iran in the same way that like the King of England is the supreme leader of England. He's not like the supreme leader in the sense that that he literally does all the governing. He has like a prime minister and a legislature and a judiciary and all those kinds of institutions as well in Iran. But he's also like not the Pope of Shiites, but he's an important guy in Shiism. So we do have unrest in many places across the Middle East that are majority Shia based upon this. This is from Bahrain, which is another one of these countries that's Shia majority, but has a minority that rules over them of a different sect in a monarchical system. And there was some pretty substantial unrest after the death of this and the start of the war. So we're going to see more of that. I unfortunately see with this strategy of a long civil war, and I'm keeping in mind this thing lasts a very long time, last time, was more blowback, right? And there was this attack in Texas, and the worse the humanitarian situation gets in Iran, the more Iran is letting in reporters, which is crazy. If you think compare that to Gaza. As reporters finally get to positions where they can actually see what's going on in Tehran, we could see more of this as people get stirred up by the humanitarian situation if it does get bad. Now, we need to remember that before the war, they were isolated and poor, and they were protesting these things, right? So it could get bad really quickly on a humanitarian basis when it comes to food and supplies as civil society is disrupted. So this attack in Texas, was it a blowback attack? That's a legitimate question. I kind of think it probably odds are that it is, but we still have an investigation to do. Well, the facts are we got 3 dead people. The killer was a 53-year-old naturalized citizen originally from Senegal, and he wore a shirt that said "Property of Allah." Right? He had a Quran in his vehicle. The timing right after, it's a lot. It doesn't do a lot of the polling here, but those are very, we have some means, but we don't. He obviously had a weapon, and he was there, and he was caught in the scene of the crime and shot. We have a motive, right? That seems clear, but we don't know his personal philosophy yet. We need to do more investigations, of course, the police will. And then the material evidence, right? Did he have any connection to a sleeper cell in the United States, or was he just some random guy who was very much about Shiism and then saw this happen and went out to go shoot some people? But this is the classic case of blowback, right? Where we have, and that's not, it's not a classic case. Classic case of blowback is you have a secret operation that then becomes public when it all turns tits up, right? This is a very public operation that has a blowback in the sense of now we have the exposure of being an empire is that we invite these sorts of things because we're doing stuff all over the world to other peoples. And unfortunately, we are a multi-ethnic state that has invited the world in, and therefore when we do these things, it really exposes us. If we're going to invite the world in, we really need to be focusing on peace because we don't know what kind of internal ethnic stripes we're importing from other places. It just makes it dangerous. So hopefully something that the FBI was equipped for before these attacks happened. I haven't heard much from the administration about exactly what that looked like. But obviously what we're going to get when asked is, well, we're doing everything we can. So deeply wonder, I really hope we don't see anymore, but I fear that we will. All right, so if it's a likely protracted war in Iran, the same way it was in Syria, I want to remember, this 3 to 6 week time frame. In Syria, it was 13 years, 8 months, and 23 days. Long time for civil war. And then additionally what we know from civil wars is that they do invite other power players to come in. We could see Russia get involved, China, and other powers that want to be involved with something like this. Afghanistan's right there. Pakistan's not far away. All kinds of reasons for them to be worried and concerned and maybe get involved. And then lastly, we know this from Syria too, massive migrant crisis. We're going to see all these people. They have 90 million people in Iran. It's a lot of people. The migrant population in Europe has exploded. And the reason why, the number one reason why is America's terror wars, the jihad across the Middle East, causing massive disruption of life, civil societies where people say, I need to leave or I'm going to die. So then people get their families and they book it north to try to find a better life for themselves. The amount of humanitarian crisis is going to happen out of a place like Iran, from what we understand of its topography and climate and everything else, could be disastrous. Especially if water salinators get destroyed, stuff like that, it could be really nasty as migrants go north to try to find a place to live. And I wonder to what degree our European allies are aware of that. So some real questions that we're still left with is the naval situation is interesting. We still have everything's jammed up in the Strait of Hormuz. U.S. has sank a bunch of ships. The U.S. is claiming that this is the first ship sank with a torpedo since World War II, which is just okay. Well, I just man out for a minute. This is really cool looking. Watch this thing. The whole thing lifts up like, oh my God, crazy. Submarine shot down a cruiser, I think. I don't think it's a battleship. I think it's a cruiser. And just whoa, just the explosive power there is just insane. Oh God, that's crazy. And so you have that. You have this crazy story about a cruiser shot off of Indian like being in like a drill with Indian forces and then being sunk. That's kind of crazy. There's the USS Soleimani corvette was downed as well. But supposedly Iran is supposed to have this huge small vessel navy that they've been bragging about for years. And we haven't seen anything from them. Now, it could be that we just devastated them all already. And that's kind of what the Navy is reporting, that they're pretty much devastated their Navy and there's not really much left to them. But, still a good question about there's something they're waiting for, pushing for, whatever. Of course, and like I said, the DoD is claiming all these concerns are not concerns, that there is no interceptor problem, that Air Force supremacy is taking their ability to deploy ballistic missiles, not a problem. But we're still left with the question of, is that race going to play out? And lastly here, I want to just hit the domestic policy because I know I'm running up on time. Is that, Trump is still tweeting about the SAVE Act, but there's no political will to do anything of substance about it. He's not calling on Thune or Senate leadership to any degree. He's not putting any pressure on. He'll tweet about Thomas Massie for a week straight, but he won't say John Thune is betraying the republic and is not MAGA and everyone should go harass him. He's not doing any of that stuff. He's just saying we need to do something about it. He's not calling out the zombie filibuster to repeal that. He's not doing any of that stuff. Not like he could. You just have to note that. And it's the degree to which, and this has been an instinct of America First for a long time, the more we're focused on things overseas, the more we just don't have any energy for stuff in America. And you have real stuff waiting. I mean, between the Road Act, the SAVE Act, and so many other things, the REINS Act. And then you have this. And this came out today. Stepping way back on his house. And this isn't going to lose me so much. I mean, I don't get me wrong. I like deportations of criminals and all, but this is a large part of the MAGA base here was about deportations of otherwise law-abiding, productive immigrants, but they're still not here legally, so we got to deport them. Well, this is where he's at now.
Many countries opened up their prisons and dropped them into the United States. Those are the people who are getting out. And we have a lot of heart. They said, you got to lighten up on this. We have a lot of heart for people. They came in illegally, but they're good people, and they're working now on farms, and they're working in luncheonettes and hotels and all. And we're looking to get the criminals out right now, the criminals. And I think it's very important. I mean, every once in a while you see a story, we take somebody. He should be out because they came in illegally. So in theory, they should be. But we're focused on the murderers, the drug dealers, the mentally insane. We have a lot of mentally insane killers. I mean,
yeah, so you heard it. That's all you really need out of it. Stepping way back on immigration deportations. And maybe that might be the right political call. I actually kind of agree that might be the right political call. After things got so out of hand, American citizens died in Michigan, whatever you think about it, just the optics just don't look good for the kind of person that's going to determine the midterm elections. And ultimately, it was kind of done in this way that's very like hype video, kind of looked cruel to some people. The enforcement itself got out of hand in some ways that we pointed out, where you had people doing relatively, not relatively, protected American speech that were being, abused by the police and being detained for things that were just speech. Rude speech that you shouldn't do, speech that I disagree with. I don't think you should talk to anybody like that, but they were talking to these people like that and expressing themselves with that. And that is protected speech in the United States of America, and they're United States citizens. So additionally, that the Fourth Amendment concerns of some of these reports that we got out of people being checked for papers simply on their accent or their look, that is not American. That is not legal. You can't do that here. But don't get me wrong, at the other side of it, if you can peacefully get rid of as many illegal immigrants as possible, I'm in favor of that. Absolutely. But what do you do about the rest of them? That's been the question in immigration policy for a very long time. What to do about the relatively peaceful people who are just here, who just want to work. And now they're stepping back when they've already hyped up all of MAGA about it. And I just, that they would have had, and if you're that guy, you should be really mad about the foreign policy adventurism, because you burnt all that capital on Venezuela, Iran the first time, Venezuela in that time, and now Iran again. So I do on that. And the next is like the MAGA coalition's fraying apart at the seams. This Kurt Mills is the editor at the American Conservative. He's been making the rounds. I really like him. He's a really good guy. I think we probably disagree on a couple policy issues, but he's an excellent articulator of American culture and society and the MAGA movement in many ways. Because, the American Conservative was the magazine started by Pat Buchanan, who's really Trump 1.0 in many ways, like laid the foundation for much of Trump's America First views, immigration views, trade views, stuff like that. He called MAGA dead in the New York Times podcast this week. That's a big deal. I generally wonder if that's the right call, but it kind of plays out. Tucker Carlson has been dropping bombs, bangers and bombs on the war lately, on a couple different podcasts, both like the interview with Mike Huckabee, but also afterwards. Quote on early, had one today about kind of like the religious dimension amongst these troops and amongst the specifically amongst Hegseth and other major important figures about the Third Temple and, the religious Christian element and the dispensationalist element to this foreign policy question. Now, reportedly, the president is, and I don't have another confirmation of this. This is a single source, but this is Jonathan Karl, and he's with ABC News. So not somebody who, is a total slouch on, press integrity, but I do wonder. You never know. This does fit the liberals' needs right now. So you always get your ABC News like, oh yeah, the antenna should rise up. But in a lengthy conversation just now, President Trump hit back at Tucker Carlson, who called the Iran war, quote, absolutely disgusting and evil. Quote, Tucker has lost his way, Trump told me. Quote, I knew that a long time ago, and he's not MAGA. MAGA is saving our country. MAGA is making our country great again. MAGA is America first, and Tucker is none of those things. And Tucker is really not smart enough to understand that. Sounds like a Trump quote. You got Tucker Carlson, one of the most important figures in kind of like the formulating of the media messaging and momentum and in philosophical coherence of MAGA and America First, is now being attacked by the president because he's not been attacked. Tucker has not been criticizing the president this whole time. He's been attacking the war, and he thinks the war is a bad idea. That could be the salvo that really tears things apart if Tucker responds. And then it's going to come down to, are you a Tucker Carlson MAGA or are you a Trump MAGA? And once we're there, the midterms are looking bad, real bad, guys. That said, I am forever looking for the silver lining, and I do see one, and I will end with you on this. The midterms are looking dark, but the Texas midterm primaries for the midterms were actually pretty awesome. They're actually really good. So Crenshaw, who is one of the worst neocons in Congress, has just been, he is so confident. I almost appreciate it. He is so confident in his indestructibility as a political figure. He publicly defended insider trading in an interview one time. You just can't even. Could you imagine being his comms guy or his chief of staff when he's like, how are we supposed to make money? So he, in a surprise loss, got smashed by a state Texas rep named Steve Toth. So very interesting. That was very encouraging. It really shows something going on in the Republican Party. I'll be honest with you guys, not encouraged in Montana. We had some not great movements here, but we do have some opportunities that are similar to Rep Crenshaw and that whole situation. We have also Rep Tony Gonzalez. He's in a tight runoff with a Brandon Herrera. So Tony Gonzalez was he was the guy who's accused of infidelity with a woman who self-immolated. She committed suicide by lighting herself on fire, which is terrifying and scary. I can't imagine why anyone would do it that way. But this young woman, his staffer dies, and there's text messages that imply very strongly that he was sleeping with her. Amongst all the black pills of almost all of Congress voting against a resolution from a representative to release the data on all these sexual harassment stuff, you do have, at least he's being challenged by a guy who is a pro-gun activist and YouTuber who nearly defeated him in this runoff. So, or in this primary. So now they're going to have a May runoff. So if you're in Texas, vote for Bryn Herrera if you're in the district. And obviously the guy's probably looking for money, so give him some cash so he can beat up on Tony Gonzalez, because that guy should not be in Congress at this point. I don't think he should have resigned after something like that came out. And it's crazy to me that there wasn't an ethics violation based upon the text messages alone, even if there's no foul play with the death. You have to wonder where the Republican Party's at if they're protecting a guy like that. So, anyways, beyond that, this is a common place for us to be in the. I want to see America be a regular country in a regular time again. It's not that I dislike the state of Israel. It's not that I dislike anybody. It's not that I like Iran or anything like that. I just want to live in a republic that's like a regular country. And I'll leave you with this, and we'll exit with Representative Thomas Massie, who did a speech from the floor this week that on his War Powers resolution, I feel like was powerful and needed, and everyone should listen to it. And even if you've heard it before, I want you to listen to it again, because these are the moments that actually build the future more than you think they do. When Ron Paul was running in 2012, the amount of floor speeches that we would use on the internet to beef him up were real, and they really mattered. It just takes some good graphic design and a little bit of music, and you can turn this into something really powerful. And I just want you to capture this moment, because we're the remnant of the real country, the country that was meant to be, the tradition that was American. And Representative Thomas Massie is one of the best guys fighting for that right now, and I think he deserves the kudos for it.
Mr. Speaker, James Madison wrote to Thomas Jefferson in 1789, "The Constitution supposes what the history of all governments demonstrates, that the executive branch of power is the most interested in war and most prone to it. It has accordingly, with studied care, vested the question of war in the legislature. The Constitution is clear. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11 of our Constitution provides Congress initiatory powers of war. Article 2, Section 2, Clause 1 of our Constitution gives the President operational powers of war to wage that war. Even if this body were to pretend that the 1973 War Powers Resolution supersedes the clear language of the Constitution, the President still has not met the conditions required by that law itself. The 1973 War Powers Resolution states plainly that the President may only introduce U.S. armed forces into hostilities pursuant to 3 conditions. Either 1, declaration of war, 2, specific statutory authorization, or 3, a national emergency created by an attack upon the United States. None of those conditions exist today. Iran has not attacked the United States, Congress has not declared war, and Congress has not granted specific statutory authorization. Beyond the constitutional question, here lies an even more important one. Why are we going to war with Iran? We owe our military service members a clear mission. And American families in my district want to know how this is going to help them pay for groceries. How does this make them any safer in their schools or in their neighborhoods? How does this help them pay for housing? Have we learned nothing from the laundry list of wars and regime change experiments we sparked across the Middle East that have racked up a total of at least $8 trillion of debt in Iraq, Libya, Syria, Afghanistan? A sustained war with Iran will not stabilize the region. It's already ignited the region. It will radicalize new generations of terrorists, and it will send more swarms of refugees into Europe and the United States. Iran is not Venezuela. The Ayatollah was not a president. He was a religious leader from a region notorious for radical Islamists. And the United States and Israel turned him into a martyr. And in the process of doing so, we've already expended billions of dollars, and more solemnly, 6 American families must now lay to rest their sons and daughters. And for what? This administration can't even give us a straight answer as to why we launched this preemptive war. The president says we had to strike first because an Iranian strike was imminent. Meanwhile, the Department of Defense conceded there was no evidence of an imminent Iranian strike. Some told us this war was about nuclear weapons, but 6 months ago, we were assured our last strike on Iran decimated their nuclear program. So which is it? I think the most candid answer came from the Secretary of State, who told the press that Israel forced our hand and dragged us into this war again. And that truth is the very reason why it is Congress that must decide war. If American lives are to be risked and American blood is to be shed, that decision must be debated and voted on by the representatives of the American people. And that debate is meant to be arduous. And that vote is meant to be hard. I have a theory. I think my colleagues don't want to go on record because we have a terrible track record of meddling in the Middle East. They don't want their name associated with this when it doesn't turn out well. But Congress cannot be bothered with its constitutional duty because for many in this chamber, it's easier to simply allow someone else's sons and daughters to be sent to combat without their vote. And to be clear, we aren't even here to declare war today. All we're voting on is a war powers resolution to reassert the Constitution, that Congress must decide questions of war. And if Congress wants war, then the Speaker should hold a vote to declare it. Some say Congress authorizes war when we pay for it, when we pass the budget bill. Here's the problem. We haven't taken on the hard work of defining the mission for our sons and daughters who are going to fight. That's not in the budget bill. It never is. And to the men and women who are engaged in combat, I sincerely thank you, and I pray for your safety. It is for you that I wrote this resolution. It is for you that all of us are here on this floor working so hard to force this vote so that you will have a clear mission that you deserve, so that you will know when you achieve it, you can come home.
Thank you so much for watching. Have a good day.
Thanks for tuning in to Human Reaction. Please be sure to like, follow, subscribe, and give us a review on your podcast platform of choice. And if you want to become a member and support the show financially, check out humanreactionpod.com.